Welcome to It's All Fine and Anjee, where we talk about community, health, culture, and all of the big and little things that make life good. Here are your hosts, Dan and Anjee.
Hi, guys. Welcome to episode number 21. Lucky number 21.
Is 21 lucky?
I think that's a lucky number.
You're right. Well, it's lucky now.
Yeah. So this and that.
Let's do this.
What's up?
Well, I'm tired. I hate to admit it.
We're always tired.
We're supposed to be peppy and this and that over coffee. We don't even have coffee.
I need to go to sleep after this. That's why.
I know, me too.
Yeah, I'm feeling just a little stressed. You know, I don't get stressed too often, but...
Are you? I didn't know that before we started recording.
You can't even tell.
All right, guys, we're going to talk real fast and wrap this one up.
Yeah, that's it. No, so feeling a little stressed just because I do have my final project, my presentation for graduation coming up.
Your capstone.
My capstone. So a little bit of pressure, but it's okay. It's coming, it's coming along good. I've been leaving the house, going up to the school, even though I don't have to be there to concentrate.
I totally get that.
As soon as I got home today, my brain does not function in the house when it comes to schoolwork. I got some done, but not enough. So
I can understand. I
have to get out of here, man.
I get it. I can work here, but I struggle writing here.
Yeah. And the other thing is at nighttime, I already know if it's past a certain time, it's not going to happen. I'm just not one of those stay up all night. There's no quality that comes out of me at that time of night.
Indeed.
Mommy needs sleepy.
I'm with you.
But I did want to mention, though, at our school, the school that I attend, it's Everglades University up in Maitland. And they're doing this coming Saturday, the 17th. They are doing like an open house and a mini health fair. And I wish I could be there, but we will be out of town recording with another guest.
That's right.
I missed this time, but it's a cool little event that they're doing from 10 to 1. They're collecting some donations for a local elementary school for like a school supply drive. They're going to have some on-site activities such as getting your blood pressure checked, weight and height checks, blood type, glucose readings, things like that. There will be a bunch of alternative med exhibits. And then you can also kind of ask them questions about the different programs that they offer there. Because they have things like aviation there and construction management. So they have some things that are a little different than most schools have. So check it out. Everglades University, 10 to 1, this Saturday the 17th. We'll put a link on the show notes.
Indeed we will.
And on the website. Yeah. So I thought that was pretty cool. I told him I'd help him out, shouting that out for him. And what else have I been doing? So I've been working on perfecting an avocado brownie recipe.
Yes, I tried that, actually. It was pretty good.
It was good. It had a little bit too much of ghee in there, is what I used instead of butter.
Right.
If anybody knows what ghee is. So I'm working out the ratios there with some different types of flour and stuff in case people have allergies to one. I can substitute it with another. But, trying to fit that in, perfecting the avocado recipe. But it's so good. Avocado brownie recipe. Once I perfect it, I will put it on my website, foreverinhealth.com. And we'll put a link in one of the shows. I'll tell everybody when I perfected it.
Right. And you know what?
You'll tell everybody when I perfected it.
And I hate to be like somebody made you something. That's why I was so apprehensive to say it was pretty good. I think for me, it tasted really good. It was just the, me, I'm weird about consistency.
It was very dense. It was too oily. So.
Plus, if you don't tell me it's an avocado brownie, I'm probably going to like it better.
Stop. I hate that. Stop. Just eat it. If it's good, it's good.
You know how many people are like that, though?
Yeah, I know.
That's how you're going to... You have to trick people and just say healthy brownie.
Well, yeah, because for my capstone, I'm doing like a whole table that's like information station, basically. It's going to be brochures that people can take home that are like useful tips and just some information on health and wellness.
Yeah.
And diet, of course. And I'm bringing some healthy snacks so people can see that it tastes good to eat healthy, and it's really not that hard. I'm going to even print recipes out so that people can actually take it home and try it.
Awesome. Sounds great. I still don't think you should call them avocado brownies, though.
Okay, you'll have to help me come up with a cute name.
Just call them like healthy brownies. You can eat healthy or something, because I would be like...
Yeah, but I like catchy little names. You know how I come up with stuff
you're
like
good at that.
Sea of Cruciferous and, all these different names I come up with.
The no-frownie brownie?
Oh, snap.
Somebody's just writing that down right now.
That was amazing. The no-frownie brownie. I love it. That's it. That's the name of it.
It's stolen already.
Yep.
Low frownie brown. Oh, no. I've already messed it up.
No-frownie brownie.
No-frowniebrownie.com is being purchased right now by one of our listeners.
That's awesome. Well, they can have my recipe on there. There you go.
There you go.
And last Saturday, we were busy. We had a busy weekend. Saturday, we were booked with interviews.
We were. It
pretty
took
much
the
our
whole day.
day.
That's right.
I know.
It was fun, though.
It was fun.
Very busy.
And then we did something Sunday.
Yeah, we did Rachel's final performance of the Fairy Tale Misfits, which was really, really funny. And
there was a lot of laughs.
There really
they switched some things up, and
that's what I started to say.
Up.
That's what I started to say. At the end of most plays, the very last run of the play, the actors usually ham it up a little, usually not too much, because the director will start getting upset. But they did that. They did some unexpected things. They changed
great.
A couple of lines. It was really good. Yeah, and everybody was very comfortable. I mean, the show has been great all the way through, but it was a really good flow at the end. So you know what it showed me? I've been going to several of these showings of the Fairy Tale Misfits, but it showed me that if you're only going to go to one, the last one's probably the best one. So.
Yeah, because they have all the practice in. They got their lines down pat.
Yep,
they know how to kind of overcome obstacles.
Yeah,
and
starting to really have fun. But getting to, I'm glad Rachel had the opportunity. She went to the after party. She's made social media friends with all the actors. I've made friends with some of the actors. Just a really cool bunch. And it was a lot of fun. A lot of laughs. Though,
I look forward to the next one that she does.
I do too. I really do. Then we hit the bike trail.
Yes.
That was fun too. We did 10 miles, didn't we?
Yeah. So we didn't kill ourselves because, guys, we haven't been out in a while.
We haven't been out in a while.
We are hermits lately.
We've been recording podcasts.
I really cannot wait till school's done. I really can't. I am looking forward to
kayaking, camping,
and biking and getting outside on the weekends. And I love that we do our podcast on the weekends, but we are going to start cranking like 3 of those in a day or something.
Sure. And, we may integrate that too. You never know. We may do one out there camping or kayaking or whatever.
Yeah.
We've talked a little bit about doing that. I think it'd be neat to do one going down the river. But yeah, we hit the bike trail. We did about 10 miles. You were kind of easing back into it because we haven't had time to go do it in a while. It was cool though. I bought a new GoPro. The worst time to buy one because there's a new one coming out next month, I think. But I sold some of my old cameras. I'm always into kind of, me. I like to do the wheeling and dealing to where I don't really pay anything for the new thing.
Yeah, or very little.
Yeah. So having said that, it's very impressive. We went and filmed on the bike. I have been building these. Anjee could tell you guys this. It's hilarious. But I have been MacGyvering these sort of selfie stick monopod poles and taking the screws out and putting these other parts in. So now they lock into our kayaks. But we do need one more GoPro.
Yeah.
So I figured what I would do is when the new one comes out, I'll buy that one. And then we'll have 2. And then we'll have 1 in each kayak.
So you can actually be on some videos now when we're kayaking.
Right, exactly. Yeah.
Seems to be a lot of my back on the kayaking when we're going, which is cool.
It is cool.
I like to see that you are there too.
Well, we can
That's
do that
nice.
now too. Or, once I get the other camera. But anyway, the new GoPro is very neat. It's got like a built-in stabilizer. So you don't need any kind of fancy equipment. You can go biking or running, and the footage is perfectly smooth. So
and
that's
you did
been
a
really,
really
fun.
cool video of that. You should post that on the.
Oh, I could.
You
Yeah,
should
I did.
post that. Yeah, because that'd be cool if people are interested in maybe purchasing one of those things and are a little intimidated by it.
Sure.
They can actually see what it does, and it's very easy to use.
It really is, and that's a good point. So, and I did tons of research, probably to the point to being borderline insane amount of videos and research I did.
Always with the research.
I know. But there's a feature in the new GoPro called Time Warp where it will do a really high speed, what's kind of like a time lapse, but a time lapse is really just a bunch of pictures stuck together. Mm-hmm. This is actually a video that is running at 30 times the speed or whatever it is, and it's it's stabilized, so it's really smooth. It's very hard to explain, but when you see a video or one of these sort of time warp videos, you're like, whoa, that is trippy. So
Yeah.
I'll post it on the in the show notes if you're interested. It's near the end of the video where we start doing the time warp stuff. And kind of related, as I was doing some of this research, I discovered something called Facebook groups. Now, we all know what those are,
Yeah.
and we've always been members of a couple of them. But it just dawned on me, I wonder if there's a Facebook group about this GoPro camera. There is. I wonder if there's a Facebook group about the camera I already have. There is. The one I was looking to get. There is. Kayaking in Florida. And on and on
There
and on.
basically is a group for everything.
Right. So now I'm like members of the bicycle group in Florida and the kayaking group. And it's been so cool because people are like saying, go do this river and go do that river and try this camera. And here's a video clip I did of a kayak trip. And I love it because it's like,
cool.
now we can look at videos and kind of decide where we want to go because there's a lack of that stuff. If you
Yeah.
are trying to find a river to go kayaking in Florida, a lot of the sites don't really have much in the way of pictures.
No, they tell you, how far it is from point A to point B, but they don't actually give you pictures down the river and
Right.
how clear it is and
Yeah.
where does the murky part start? Because we always like to
Exactly.
know how much of that clear area we get.
Sure, and you can ask all kinds of questions on those sites, like, can you bring paper products? Can you,
Yep.
is it difficult if you're like we're not new kayakers, so it's funny to me because I see some of them where people are like, it's quite difficult, and I'm like, it's really not. And I don't think it's us. I think people
Yeah.
are just panicked
When you
about
bring-
something, or
yeah,
maybe
like-
they have little kids or something.
Yeah, like the rapids.
Right,
When
the
we say
rapids and juniper,
people
yeah.
freak out in Florida.
Right,
Because we're like,
exactly.
what the heck?
But anyway, I'm having a lot of fun learning from other people, helping other people, and watching footage that other people have, both of their trips and just using their new GoPro. So that's been a lot of fun for me, and I've squeezed that in between all the other things that are going on, all the work. Work is really picking up for me. I'm getting ready to travel to Houston again, to Chicago, to Vegas, possibly to Quebec, all within the next few months. So
Yeah.
it's going to be pretty wild trip. But I think that is pretty much all that's going on for me. And I think that's really all that's going on for our this and that today. So we did want to ask you to stay because we have a really cool guest this week. This is, again, another one of our Meet the Teachers or Month of Teachers. I keep saying Meet the Teachers.
I forgot to announce that at the beginning.
That's
Yes,
totally cool.
hashtag Month of Teachers.
But I say Meet the Teachers because I'm so used to
Yeah,
doing that throughout the kids' lives. But for this week's interview, we had a really cool high school teacher. I don't want to go too far into it, but I really think you should hang out and listen to the rest of it. And we'll be right back after this break. Hey guys, welcome back. And now it's time for our community call out. And I also want to welcome you back to our Month of Teachers. Last week we met with Angel Foster, an elementary school teacher, but today we're on the other end of things and we're meeting with a teacher that's helping to prepare our young kids for life beyond high school. She's a high school history teacher, and we're excited to hear all about the challenges of teaching young adults today. So please welcome Kristen Rogers. Thanks for sitting down with us, Kristen.
Yes, thank you.
So,
Thank you for coming out early this morning.
Oh, yeah, no problem.
I guess it's kind of early still.
Yeah.
10,
It's not
10
too
o'clock
bad.
or so.
I had to be at work at 7, so this
so
wasn't
this
bad
is
at all.
late.
On Saturday?
No, not just
during the week.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
That's
I'm
an-
like, ooh,
yeah,
that's asking a lot of our teachers.
You can't drift in late when you're a teacher, that's for sure. So before we get into all the teacher stuff, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and maybe what you did over the summer break?
Yeah, sure. So I grew up in Florida. I went to UCF. I got a bachelor's degree in history. And I obviously stayed in the area, started teaching for Lake County schools. And over the summer, I actually work for the College Board. So I'm an AP history teacher. I teach AP World History and AP US History.
Nice.
Cool.
Yeah. And they have me grade. So every summer, I went to Salt Lake City for 2 years. And this summer, we were in Kansas City in Missouri. And I graded the AP World History exam. They have different requirements, different writing requirements. And so I graded one of the essays.
Oh, cool.
Oh, that's really cool. So
So-
you really are a history nerd.
I have a master's actually in ancient and classical history that focused on European history, pretty much from Greece all the way up until about the Enlightenment time period. So
Wow.
I wrote a master's on my thesis for my master's was on like humanist education and how it affected females in Tudor England. So
Wow.
yeah, I've since a child, like I remember talking to my grandma about like what life was like when she was a kid in the 40s and what life was like for my grandpa. So I've always been interested.
So you were interested at an early age.
I didn't know, but yeah, I actually was a pre-med major for about 3.5 years and I took a history's required for a general.
Don't know why, but yeah.
So I took a history class and I just remember, his name was Dr. Greenhall. And I just remember thinking like, I want to be that guy when I grow up. And
Cool.
against advice from every person I know, I changed my major to history and spent another 1.5 years at UCF changing, to get a history degree.
So you're definitely doing what you're passionate about.
Yes. Yeah. He was amazing. Like just the love that he had and the knowledge and the views he had and understanding why we are who we are today and where that comes from is just absolutely amazing. So I remember telling my husband at the time, I'm like, I think I'm going to be a history degree and be a history.
And you were going to be a doctor. Everybody's like, don't change that.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I was going towards like a nurse practitioner degree, but yeah. And my husband's like, are you sure?
That's great, though.
When
I
you
love it
find
when people
something like
chase their
that,
passion.
Is something sparks in you when you're like, I could do that and be happy doing it. Right?
And I loved it.
Yeah.
Like, I enjoyed science, obviously, and people and being around people. And I knew I always wanted to be around people. I find them fascinating. And, but there was just something like, I'm like, I love history as much as that guy. And I want to be like him.
That's great. I love that. See, my philosophy is that, and I tell my kids this, that, don't go after the job. This is not very common, I think, with parenting. Maybe it is these days, but don't go after the job for money. Don't go after the job that's going to make it. To me, it doesn't matter if you're into, I told my son this the other day, if you just like digging holes, go after a job where you're digging holes. So that's to me, when you chase your passion, you can do no wrong.
Yeah.
And you're probably really good at it because you love it so much.
I do. I do. And the kids know it. And I'll have kids like, that I'll get. So I teach 10th grade.
I was just going to ask.
Yeah. I teach 10th graders. So I teach AP World to 10th grade. And then I teach AP US History to 11th graders.
Wow.
And then I teach. So I'm also employed through Lake Sumter, and I teach dual enrollment on our campus, and I teach humanities, and then I teach 2 introductory courses for like career planning and study skills like that. So I actually see the same cohort of kids for 10th, 11th, and 12th grade.
Oh, wow. That's cool.
Yeah, and I'll get a lot of kids that come in as 10th graders and are like, man, history stinks. I don't want to remember.
That's how I felt when I was in high school. I'm not going to lie.
I bet you make it fun because you like it so much.
I do. I love it. And they'll come back. Like, I'm like, I'll get them in 11. And when it's an AP course, that's an election. Like, you're electing to take a course that's challenging.
I was going to ask if you found that the AP students are more into learning about the actual history instead of just taking a class.
I would say it would depend on the grade level. So in 9th and 10th grade, the school system, and I know you know about school grades and all that, and there's all these different factors that go into it. So one of the things that help the schools is the number of kids in advanced courses. And so especially at the 2 lower levels at 9th and 10th grade, there's a big like mass shove
to take those classes.
To try to get kids to do AP. Once they get into 11th and 12th grade, they can dual enroll. And so your number of AP students tend to drop off some. And that's where I notice like those kids they either really want to be there or they really want to be with that teacher. Yeah. Because I'll get kids that are like, because like I was saying, they'll come in 10th grade and I'm like, oh, I don't really like history. I'm a math person. I'm like, all right. But then I'll see them in 11th grade and I'll see them in 12th grade. And I'm like,
keep coming back.
Yeah. I'm like, look at you. You're in humanities. We're going to learn about, art in Europe. Like, who would have thought that you would be sitting here? And they're like, yeah, I know.
That's cool.
Well, that's great. It must mean that you've influenced them from that first year then.
Have you always taught high school, or have there been other grades that you've taught?
So when I graduated high school, right, I was like a lot of people. I graduated with a humanities degree and like, what am I going to do with this? You know?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, well, I really want to teach. So I went to look, but at the time, so I've been teaching, this will be my 12th year teaching. And when I started teaching, a lot of the social studies positions were held by coaches.
I remember those days in high school.
Well, so not to sound
the coaches
foolish,
were teaching classes that they really shouldn't have been teaching.
Yeah.
just because that was hard to find someone that wanted to teach it, or
so I feel like this in the beginning, the social studies department, in fact, it's a joke among a lot of the history teachers, is we're kind of the stepchild of education, right? Because like English and reading is so highly tested and so highly watched. Science is so highly tested.
Oh, that's
Math.
a good point.
Yeah.
And social studies are just kind of like,
learn about the world.
yeah. And so, I felt like in the beginning it was a lot of, oh, this guy, he's an awesome football coach. Let's give him world history.
Right. Okay. I got you.
Because it wasn't really a tested subject.
Yeah, and maybe the kids will pay attention to him a little more because he's a coach.
Yeah.
Or, because I remember we had coaches that were teaching those kind of classes, and they had like a booming voice and could get your attention, but they weren't teaching anything.
They're kind of checking the boxes almost.
Yeah, they're checking the box. You're taking the test. You're reading the chapter. Read chapter 1. Very boring. Very boring.
And I will say a positive aspect of that is that I feel like that's changed a lot here recently.
Yeah.
Now it's more of like, what do you offer the school? And by the way, do you teach or coach?
Oh, so they asked that secondary.
Mm-hmm. And they're hiring a lot within. And if they do hire, someone, like if they hire someone who's a coach, they tend to give them more like PE things, So a lot of our PE teachers tend to be the coaches now. And so it's been I've noticed a big change. There's more focus. And of course, there's more testing now in the histories. And then they've learned that, history can teach you reading, right?
Yeah,
it can and it can make your English class make more sense. Like if they're reading, Mark Twain, to know what was happening in the 1800s, and
it all
I
ties
never
together.
thought about it like that.
I never did either. And I'll be honest, for me, I'm more of an English. I write stuff, so I'm more of the English type.
Yeah.
But history was somewhere along in my classes that I somewhat enjoyed. I was the type of kid that didn't really do well in math. So history was a little bit like English to me in a way that, it's a lot of reading. It's a lot of stories. So in a way, I think, so I'm trying to look at this through the eyes of kids that don't like that kind of stuff. And I don't know that my kids like it, to be honest with you. So.
Yeah. Well, and in high school, I hated English class.
Yeah. I think you're one way or the other normally.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So did you like math then?
I loved math.
That's how it is.
That's how girls usually are, I think.
Well,
Because I liked math, or I don't know. Is it the opposite?
No, my daughter's the other way around. I just think your brain is either math or English, and it's rare to be both.
Yeah.
Well, and what I've noticed like a lot of it's personalities. Like the more I teach high school kids, the more I can they think it's funny, but in many ways you learn a lot about psychology. And so, kids will come in, I'm like, you're a math kid. And math kids are like me, right? I'm very type A. I'm very organized. I'm very structured.
And that's what's funny though, is he's type A, and then he loves
I had
English.
anxiety
Isn't
about
that
math.
weird?
It is weird.
I had anxiety about math, though. I think that might have been because math, unlike English, there is an exact specific, there's no variable. There's no room for, you're kind of right. You're either right or wrong in math.
Oh, see, that's what I liked.
Yeah.
See, in English, I remember specifically, I had one teacher and we had to read a poem. And to be honest with you, I was 10th grade, so I don't remember now, but I just remember her asking like, what does the butterfly mean? And I remember looking at the connecting me. I'm like, it's a butterfly. It doesn't mean
It's
anything.
interpretable, right?
Yeah. And then she'd be like, no, it represents the rebirth of, and I'm like,
Well, really, it depends on. You could argue, and I probably would have argued this. Well, really, it depends on what I view it as, because
Right.
that's what poetry is, right?
So, but
It's whatever how it talks to you, just like a piece of art. Some people will be like, "Oh, look at this beautiful piece of art. It's like a sunset," and you're like, "It's black." What are you talking about?
But I think what they do in those is they kind of, the question is usually more like, what was the artist trying to interpret with the butterfly? That's kind of where the snag is, because then you're trying to get in the head of the
artist.
Yeah. It's interesting. So are there other grades you'd like to teach in the future?
honestly, no.
You're covering a wide.
You have a wide range there, but you like this age group.
I do like this age group. I've told my husband, I think at one point, so I've worked for the school system since I was 18, right?
Oh.
I obviously wasn't teaching at 18.
Yeah.
But I worked with the elementary school kids, and I did the after school program while I was going to college, because again, I'm
You get your experience as well.
I get experience. And I was also a type A personality. So I kind of, when I decided to change my major, I was like, hey, I'm working towards Florida retirement system, right? So I can retire with 30 years experience at 48 years old. And so I was like planning all this out. And yeah. And so I told my husband, I'm like, I think when I retire, I'd like to teach college solely, part-time adjunct thing. Pick up classes here and there. Yeah. And I think that would be interesting to see.
Yeah, no doubt.
So when you teach college, do you want to teach the kids that are coming right out of high school and going in, or the older people? So I just started college at 40, and I noticed there's a different dynamic with people.
When
they're a little older and in school. It's a little more challenging, I'm going to tell you. They have opinions.
Yeah.
There's also, I would think, more of a passion, and I could be wrong, but I went to college in my 30s. But I felt like there's a passion. Adults are like, I was, full disclosure here, I was a terrible kid in high school, barely graduated high school. I was like straight A student in college, sitting at the front of the class, helping other kids. And I think adults are kind of like that.
Yeah,
so
the maturity level's different.
Right.
Yeah.
And you're it's on your dime.
You're choosing it and you're paying for it. Yeah, exactly.
And maybe, I'm not sure if you thought of it that way, but do you have a preference when you get into the college stuff?
No, I've never really looked at it that far.
Yeah.
Now with a master's degree, I would be limited to what I could teach.
Because you have a PhD.
Yeah, really. I mean, it's not necessarily required at the university level, but one thing I've learned is as people get older in life, they tend to appreciate the past more. And so when I was going through my master's program, I had a bunch of people that were 45 and 46 getting their master's in history. And so,
cool.
So it's kind of the supply and demand thing.
Yeah.
You get a lot more history degrees and you get like biochem.
Of course. You know what? That we talked about this recently, that something about that's true. Maybe it is maturity, because I remember sitting through social studies and history movies or classes and just trying to stay awake. And now we'll catch ourselves watching a documentary. It might even be the same one we were watching back in high school, and we're doing it out of entertainment for ourselves. Yeah. So there is an interest as you get older. I wonder why that is.
I don't know. I think
that's a whole psychology class.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I would assume some of it's tied in.
Maybe because it's your choice. You know what I mean? Like when you're younger and it's not really your choice. You're going to watch this. Like this is part of the curriculum.
I think it may also have something to do with just being generally curious about how we became who we are.
Mm-hmm. And I would even say maybe like restoring a legacy. Like by the time you're in your 40s,
that's a good
you probably
point too.
have children, and you want your children to know, like, hey, this is
how it was when you grew up.
This is where we came from, and maybe even nostalgia in some sense.
Oh, that's probably a lot of it, actually.
Yeah, because I know, like in high school, I remember learning about. So I was born in '84, right? And I remember learning about like the end of the Cold War and all this, and I'm like, oh, that's boring. This is stupid. And now that I'm like 35, I look back and I'm like, hey, that's when I was born,
right?
like that was happening during my time. And there's much more appreciation, even from someone who always loved history. To look back. And I even find myself like, telling my children who are young, like my oldest is 9, my youngest is 4, but I'll come back and say, hey, that's when mom was born, or this was happening when I was your age. And
you're planting these little seeds in their head of where to place things in time, which is cool.
I'm trying very hard to get my own children to love history. It's been a challenge, but
don't force it too much.
I know, I'm trying not to.
Well, I think once kids discover, maybe when they're not kids, the sort of the effects that all that stuff, like the end of the Cold War, those big major points in history, the effects they have on everything, including all the way down to their pop culture that they're so into, are directly influenced by those. Our whole society is affected by those things.
Those things.
Yeah. And you're more mature to appreciate it, I feel. And I've even told my own students this, but even when you get older and you start doing things, and I'm trying to think of the best way to say this, but you start like paying taxes, and you start
real life,
and you start discussions, and you start having opinions, like real strong opinions, and you start to appreciate, why you have those things,
right?
What molded that,
and why you got where you got, and so that in particular is one of the things that I really want my children, like not just my own personal children, but my students to kind of appreciate. Like, 200 years ago, people didn't have this, right?
Right.
Yeah, because they take that for granted. And I know you see that a lot because of the age group that you're dealing with, but things are just taken for granted, of why they have it.
Right.
There's no struggle in how they got what they have or what they're,
or how much things have gotten better.
That's right. Yeah. That's right. Yeah. They have no idea.
And even people that have, so my brother-in-law was born in Romania, and he lived through the Romanian communist revolution.
Oh, wow.
Wow.
Yeah. And he's not,
I bet you love talking to him.
I keep saying wow, but that's.
He's completely interesting. And even, he's my age, 34 or whatever. He was a little bit younger when the revolution went through. But just the stories he remembers, his grandpa was an educator who was constantly being retaught on how to educate and what to say in the classroom.
Oh,
wow.
So to bring, I want to bring him in to my history classes when we talk about the fall of communism and different places, and just, for them to see, the things that you hear about people not being allowed to have opinions, or people not being allowed
it's
to.
Not that long ago.
It wasn't that long ago.
To have books or to, just so many interesting things like that kids don't know about.
Well, and he even told us about how his grandpa had a radio that got interception from Italy, which of course Italy was free in the 80s and still is. And they were at school and work and all this, and the government came in and raided their house and stole his radio, and there was nothing you could do because the house was provided you by the government, so it was the government's house and
their property.
It was their property, and he's just he told me that growing up, his grandpa used to tell him that you weren't allowed to befriend anyone that had nicer things than you, and it was because you assumed they worked for the government. And so the government would reward them. So he's like, he remembers being 4 and 5 and
suspicious of everyone.
Suspicious of everyone.
That's a control thing.
Yeah.
Trying to make everybody suspicious of each other.
What's interesting about that to me is I think a lot of us, even my generation, but especially our kids' generation, your students' generation, that kind of stuff seems so far removed. You picture like your great-great-grandparents, but when you're hearing that it's someone as young as you guys are, I think it hits closer to home. I would think it hits closer to home with your kids. Have you had him in, or you want to have him in to your class?
I've been working on it. So I'm trying to get him in. I used to have, now he's getting older now, but I actually had a Holocaust survivor that came in and would talk to my students. He lived in the villages, and
that's always interesting to me.
And his story, and he even talks, a little bit about it. And I'm telling you, when he talked to my class, there was not a dry eye.
Oh, I bet.
Those are hard stories to hear. Yeah,
those are. And it's just interesting, and I think that helps the students, understand that it's not just in a book. you know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It becomes real when they see somebody that's actually telling the story.
I would think it also, and maybe I'm giving the kids too much credit, but it seems like it would give, this generation more of an appreciation. We were just talking about how it's not really been that long since things have been so much worse. Stories like that, even to me and my generation, are like, quit whining about the little thing in life that you have to deal with, because there are people that went through some really, really bad stuff.
But you know how I view that, though, is with kids when they're going through challenges, even us as adults, whatever that challenge is, it's the hard thing in your life
That's very true, too.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
I guess the emotions are maybe the same, but I don't know. I always felt a little more measured when I hear about things like that. When I hear real personal stories from the actual people that went through things like that.
Makes you go, why am I whining?
It makes me recheck myself more than anything,
Well, and the very interesting thing about my brother-in-law, too, is his perspective on just America in general is so refreshing. As in, like, he's not a very political person, probably because he's Romania, and being here, but his just, the things that we as Americans take for granted or complain about, he's like, I don't, it's not that bad of a place.
Really?
Right.
Everyone,
but when
all
we've
countries
grown
have
up
their
in it
wars.
and we've seen the changes that have affected us in some way.
And everyone's probably critical of their government because, depending on if you grew up in that environment. But I think it's nice to probably get a perspective of appreciation versus complaining and being upset about what seems to be trivial in comparison,
Yeah. He's refreshing, and he's
that's
nice.
going to be cool if you can get him in the class.
Yeah. I'm working on it.
So you said you've been working in the school system since you were 18. Is that when, I know you said you changed your major. When did you change your major? Like, how far in? Because I'm just curious when you started feeling in your head like, I think maybe I want to be a teacher.
So my mom worked in the school system, and my stepdad. They both worked for Orange County Public Schools.
Were they teachers or just
no?
They just
neither one of them were actual teachers. And my mom told me my whole life that I should be a teacher, right? And she would always say things like, "Oh, it's perfect, and you can be a mom, and you can have summers off, and you can do this and that." And I just remember thinking as a child, like, no. Like,
not for me.
Not for me, thanks.
I am a kid. I don't want to deal with kids.
Yeah. And so when I went to Apopka High School, right? And
so did I.
Yeah. And they had a magnet school type thing. And so I was in the health magnet, and I was like taking more sciencey classes in high school, and I still loved my history classes, but and when I turned 18, my mom's like, well, get a job, like be responsible, go to college. But my parents told me from a very young age, they're like, we're not going to pay for your college because we feel like if you pay for it, you'll take it more seriously.
Yeah.
And you'll try harder in high school to get scholarships.
Sure.
And so I was a little bit bitter about that at high school. Now I appreciate it. But, but so she's like, why don't you come work at the school with me and the after school program while you're in college, set your classes, and then you're only working, a few hours in the afternoon. And so I did that, and I don't really know. So I did that for maybe 3 years, as a pre-med major. And I don't know if the school system itself, changed my mind, but like 3 years, so like 3 years into it, I really think the biggest influence was that teacher.
History teacher.
Yeah. And so
because you said that there was like a shift whenever you saw him teaching.
And we talked with Angel about how some teachers that like what they're doing, kind of the same way that you like what you're doing. If you think back on the teachers you remember in your life, I don't remember very many, but the ones I remember are so significant. I think you can have such influence on people's lives as a teacher.
Very passionate, about whatever it is they're teaching, or just if they found the age group that they love to be with. There's an energy about them.
There is. I mean, I had a high school teacher that taught history that I loved. And when I changed my major, so because I was a history major and not an education major, I wasn't allowed to intern, at the school system. It's not a class. And I had a history teacher at Apopka High School that I really, really liked. And I remember reaching out to her and asking her, can I just come and observe you and see what you do, and how you do it and all of this? And she, open arms, like,
That's great.
I came back and she kind of helped me and prepared and was like, okay, well, you're going to have this hurdle because you're a history major. You're not an education major. This is how you want to set your resume and this is how you want to go in.
Oh, that's a lot of great help.
Yeah. Because, there's this idea that, there's all these ways to teach.
Yeah.
And so there's a big requirement that you learn how to teach versus what to teach.
How to set the curriculum, make lesson plans, meeting all them Sunshine State requirements.
Yeah.
Right? Those are the kind of things that you would learn if you had the education.
Yeah. And
degree.
I had none of that.
Yeah. Oh,
Yeah.
well,
But
it's
you know
good
what,
to
though?
know that you're successful as a teacher, even though you didn't have that.
But to me, I know nothing about this. All I know is from my own experience. And as we talk about education this month, I'm hearing it from Angel. I'm hearing it from you that the teachers that were really into what they were teaching are the most influential. And I would argue the most education, doing the most amount of educating that you're really supposed to be doing. Rather than following the perfect formula, it's your passion that is making the difference.
Yeah.
It's making kids interested. It's making
100%.
kids come back again and again.
Because there's lots of people that have all these degrees and I'm sorry, they're boring teachers.
Right. And
I've had professors that are boring. I want to kill myself being in class. I'm not even going to lie.
But I'll tell you, I remember teachers that, I remember my high school science teacher, and I hated science, but I loved his class because he was just geeked out for it. And I think, and so you'd get sort of drawn in because when someone is in their zone, that kind of thing is compelling, I think. So,
And
you're fascinated. You want to know why someone loves something
why are they
so
so excited
much.
about
Right.
this?
Yeah.
What
It's
is there to it? Is there
contagious.
something secret that they're hiding from us?
no, but it's
what is
kind of,
it?
I think it's
No,
contagious though, isn't it?
It is. And I've definitely told people, like I have a couple, individuals who've thought of maybe getting into teaching now that they're in their 30s or whatever, career change. And I truly believe that teachers are born, they're not taught.
Yeah.
No matter how many educational courses you go to, like I can learn all the ins and outs. And of course I had to learn it in my first couple years. But you can't take someone who's a bad teacher and make them good. You can just take a natural teacher and make them better.
I believe that 100%.
And I do too. And
Some people are not meant to teach.
I agree. And not to be disparaging to some teachers, but I think most of the teachers I had in my life were checking the boxes and they were nice enough people, but it's not as influential when you're maybe trained to be a teacher, but you really weren't born to be a teacher. Kind of thing. And I think that's why some teachers rise to the top.
I would agree. And like I said, one of my good friends is an amazing teacher, absolutely an amazing teacher. And, that's not what she went to school for. But she stumbled into it. And in fact, her degree was in advertising.
Wow. You could apply some of that probably.
But she taught elementary school. She moved to the high school. She likes to move around a lot, but, it's just, you would never know. Like if you were to talk to her, you would think that, that's all she's ever done. And that she had all this technical training and all this stuff. And it's just, it feels very natural. When you get in the classroom, I feel like if you're meant to be a teacher, you instinctively pretty much know what to do.
Yeah. You're in the zone.
Yeah. So what changes have you seen in education from the time that you began teaching until now?
So when I started in education, I felt like there was this big push to send everyone to college. And it was this idea that every single student has to be successful. And the only way to be successful is with a college degree. And there's still been a big push to that. And I feel like with time, and I'm starting to notice, maybe within the last 2 years in particular, that they're starting to recognize that you can be very successful without a college degree, and that's okay.
Sure.
And there's going to be kids that don't want to pursue any more schooling.
Absolutely. You know, my husband, I'm sure he'd probably kill me for saying this, but I'm sure he barely graduated high school. He never wanted to be
relatable.
there.
This guy too.
Yeah. and I would always talk to him because I've always loved learning, you know, and I still do. Like, we'll watch a movie and I'm like, hey, pause that. I want to Google who that person is or whatever. and he,
I live with that.
okay. You just got to know, right?
Yeah, I do. I have to know everything.
Yeah, I do too.
Yeah.
And you know, I asked him one time, I'm like, you know, why did you hate high school? Like, what was it about high school that you just didn't connect with? And he goes, you know, I knew I wanted to be an electrician. He was from Connecticut. He took an electrical course up there, and then he came back down and he was in Florida. And he goes, I remember sitting in class learning about Macbeth, thinking, why? I don't care. You know, I would rather be out there making money and doing what I like. And I've been a big advocate for, and again, I'm the lowest man on the totem pole, but, you know, I want my students to know that there's success beyond college.
Yeah.
And I'm coming from someone with a master's degree. I obviously feel like, you know,
it's not for
it's
everyone.
not for everyone. And
That's great that you feel that way though, because those students in class that are like thinking like your husband did, like, it's not for me. They have somebody that can relate to that because even though you have an education, higher education, you're married to somebody who's very successful and doesn't.
Yeah.
And
doing
it's
what
all
he
over,
loves.
you know, and of course I'm an IT computer nerd. So there's another sort of, sector of that. You know, Google doesn't require a college degree, neither does Apple now. So a lot of these big tech giants that are arguably some of the most profitable companies in the world don't require college anymore. So there's a culture shift, at least for some jobs, for sure.
Yeah. And I tell my students, you know, and I don't know if their parents always like this, but I tell them, I'm like, if you don't know what you want to do, don't waste your money finding out.
Yeah.
Well, I hope the parents tell them that too, because it puts you in such debt.
It does.
You know?
Yeah.
Or the parents in such debt if they don't really want to use that.
Yeah. And I have kids that are, you know, seniors in school and, you know, they're going into a university because they're told like, you have to go to universities. Don't go to a junior college or whatever. Yeah. And, you know, they'll get in and I've had a bunch of students come back that are just like, they spent a whole year there, thousands of dollars, and they're like, oh, I'm in firefighting school.
Yeah.
You know,
I was going to ask if there's a push towards more kind of technical things right out of high school, because I think that's a great place to start.
Yeah.
You get a degree in a year or two, right? Or in that field, a certification, whatever it is, and you go right into the workforce.
You do.
And then you have a stable job that you're doing something that you're interested in while you figure it out.
And there, believe it or not, there's a decline in the country of sort of those blue collar industrial type jobs. Mike Rowe from Dirty Jobs, the guy that does that, but had a whole write up a few months ago about how we need more of that because everyone wants to go off and do these other jobs. And there's a big hole now out there in the world for
and I think it's because a lot of kids have been conditioned to believe that college is the only way.
Yeah.
You know, and I even see it now. Like I'll have students that are like, oh, my parents said I have to go to college. And I'm like, well, what do you want to do? Well, you know, I want to be a hairdresser, you know, or, I want to like I said, my husband's an electrician, and I had one student that's like, you know, I really want to be an electrician. That's awesome, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, well, do it. You know, I can hook you up and I can let you talk to my husband and you can, you know, whatever with him. And, he's like, oh no, my parents said I have to go to college.
Well, I don't want to be a hypocrite either because I just went through this with my son who's getting ready to start college and I pushed him to go. He's going to, by his own choice, a community college. He could go straight to university, but he doesn't know what he wants to do. And I guess my philosophy with that is some of the people that I have looked up to, and I'm going to dork out, but like Steve Jobs, Bill Gates, those guys, even though they're college dropouts, college, I think for some kids at least, they're having sort of a more mature mindset now that they're out of high school and have seen the changes in my son. I think the exposure to opportunities. So even if he just goes for a year or two, I think he may discover, he has no idea what he wants to do. He may discover in the community college, you know what I like that. And that's really the main reason. It's not about the college education to me. It's about getting some new ideas that maybe you don't even know are out there. Because, you know, when you're a teenager, if you're not into a million things, and I wasn't, you don't even know, you know, I got into my career on accident and it wasn't necessarily what I wanted to do. So I'm in agreement with you both, but full disclosure, I did kind of push my son to at least get out there, start college, and see where it takes you. You know?
Yeah.
Well, I think it's important for them to have some direction. And when they're just floating out of, you know, getting out of high school and they're like, oh, I'm going to take a year off, and they don't have any direction, I think it is important for us as parents to point them in. You got to move forward.
Yeah.
Oh,
Okay?
absolutely.
Don't drift.
Unless you have $10,000 in the bank saved up that you're going to go travel to Europe and have some kind of experience like that, you can't just drift.
Right.
Especially you know,
on my dime.
on my dime.
Well,
Please.
I'm also a big fan of the state colleges or the community colleges too for that, because you're getting an education at half the price, and if it's not for you, you know,
That's right.
you're walking away and you're not paying the big university dollar.
Exactly.
And finding something else.
And I think the examples that you gave, I still agree with you, because if a kid is in high school and they're like, I want to be an electrician, I want to be a hairdresser, well, then they already know. Then go for it. But, you know, my son is more like I was, and he doesn't really know. So I feel like it gives him the opportunity. You know, Steve Jobs never knew he wanted to do what he wanted to do. He was in college and discovered it and then bailed on college and went and did it. So, you know, I think it just knowing, getting some ideas is good for some kids too.
Yeah.
So they're not drifting.
Well, and I'm a big fan of, which we don't have yet, but I'm always telling people who want to listen that I feel like we should set up some sort of like 2-track system in high school. I'm a big fan of this idea that, you know, kids kind of know. Like they know pretty early on, you know, I'm a university kid. You know, I've had students go to MIT. I've had students go to Yale. Like, they know.
Right.
I've had even kids go to UCF or UF, and they're like, I want to be, even if they don't become it, you know, I want to be a psychologist. I want to become a marine biologist.
Right.
Like, they know they're going towards that path. And then I've had other students that are like, I don't really know. I might go to community college. I might not. And I'm like, why not set them up on a track? Why lump them into the same class?
That's,
you know,
speaking my language. I've had these ideas of, it's almost like an assessment that kids should go through at the beginning of every year, because they're changing with their experiences in life, their
And they're
maturity.
so different. Yeah.
Every year from pre-K on, there should be an assessment that kids go through, and it places them in a track. Like you said, they're either the super brainy, want to learn, want to sit, can focus, or they need to be more hands-on or, you know, creative or whatever, like kind of that, you know, there's 2 different ways that kids usually go. Some fall in the middle, but most are like, you know, one or the other.
Yeah.
And I think to your point there, Kristen, that, you know, I've been working with engineers for 25 years. Most of them, and when I say most of them, I mean 95% of them, they knew they wanted to be engineers in high school.
I think jobs like that, you know, if you want to be a doctor, it's usually something happens when you're really young that influenced you. You know, these kind of big jobs like lawyers or things that take a lot of schooling. Yeah. I think most people kind of knew that at a very young age. Not always, but I think that tends to be when I talk to people that I know that are, you know, doctors or lawyers, they knew.
Yeah. Well, and I even feel like kids, they know themselves, and they know if they're, and when I say higher education learners, like they know, I mean, even like me, like I wanted to be a doctor, or a nurse practitioner. I changed my mind, but I knew that I would never make it in the world of construction, you know, or
of course.
I'm not artsy enough to be a hairdresser. I'd mess everything up. Like I knew that was my track. That's where I had to go.
Right.
And then you have other kids that, you know, I just think if they were exposed to more technical things, and that's what I've told them. I'm like, if we had a 2-track system and we suck kids that wanted to go to a 4-year university, and we, those are the kids that we can expose to Macbeth and expose to, all the deeper learnings of history.
And they're going to eat it up.
Yeah.
Right.
And then the other kids, expose them to trades, expose them to, and there was, I'm a huge nerd all around. So I listened to all types of political debates and all that. And I don't remember who said it, but one of them was like, the problem with public education is we're training kids to be philosophers and not plumbers.
Yes.
Yeah.
And the world needs more plumbers than we need philosophers.
Right there with that Mike Rowe thing I was telling you that I read. That's absolutely true.
We need all different trades, and we have to recognize in our kids what they're good at. Like my brothers are always good with taking things apart and putting it back together. They're both physical labor workers. One's a plumber, one's a stonemason.
And they seem to love it.
They love it.
Yeah.
They work hard. They make good money.
They do.
But I'm with you. I never would have survived in that world either. So
yeah, and that's just the big thing for me is I feel like if kids could be exposed even to more practical things. I have students that are maybe even barely graduating high school. I'm not exposed to them as much anymore with the level of courses that I teach, but I know of them. I see them, and we're teaching them. These macro governments, and they're learning about all the philosophy behind, capitalism or socialism or all this. And they don't know how to, they don't know how to pay bills.
Yeah.
They don't know how taxes work.
That was me. You're describing me in high school.
And it's like, why?
Why aren't we teaching them practical life skills?
My husband is a genius that he can wire a house in a day. He breezes through things, and even his science and understanding of math, like he can that's 36 inches. I need it to be da. And I'm like, what? Like slow down there. And it's not that they're not learning.
Yeah.
They're just learning things more relevant to them. And if I would sit my husband down now and be like, hey, what are your philosophies on socialism and Robert Owen?
I would say, what does philosophy mean?
Yeah. But if he was to ask me to do something in his world, I wouldn't know either.
Yeah.
And it doesn't mean one is less educated than the other. They're just different. And I think that's maybe one of the biggest failings in education is we're individuals and we try to lump them all in the same path.
Yeah.
Yeah. And they don't need to be.
No. Yeah. And there's nothing wrong. And that's the other thing is I feel like kids that don't go to college have kind of become, I don't want to say like a bad word, but it's like a 4-letter word. Like we don't tell our teachers we're not going to college, We don't tell our administrators that we don't want to go to do this or that after school. And it's like, why?
Why can't we freely speak about that?
Yeah. I mean, to me, high school is just to make you a better member of the community.
Yeah.
It's
a contributing member.
Yeah. Yeah. It's to expose you and pique interest and just give you a basic understanding of how to contribute. Yeah. And once you get there and once you graduate, use that and make something of yourself.
Yeah. Yeah. So bringing it back into the classroom, how do you keep your students engaged in class and what do you do as a teacher to influence them to stay on track outside of the classroom as well?
As in like studying
and maybe just life in general. Cause sometimes teachers can plant those seeds in class that help them get through the difficulties that it comes with, those years of becoming an adult where you're still a kid at heart, but you really want to be respected as an adult. How are you helping them to transition outside as well?
I think one of the things I do is I hold my kids accountable, and as horrible, I don't know how horrible this sounds, but I feel like a lot of things that kids miss nowadays is that accountability stage.
Great.
And it's one of those things like, kids are always exposed to, well, I have the right to an education. I have the right to this. I have the right to that. And I'm like, yeah, well, do you understand that there's also responsibility that comes with these rights?
That's right.
Mm-hmm. You have the right to a free and public education, but you have the responsibility to use it properly. And I think it's one of the things, and they kind of kid me. They say I'm the hard teacher. I raise the bar. I have the hard standards and like, she's going to hold you accountable. But I think kids like it. Kids like
indeed.
structure,
Yep.
and they like.
And the world's going to hold them accountable.
They are.
They
And-
have to be taught that at home and in the class, I think.
Yeah, and when so when you're labeled like, oh, she's the hard teacher, right? You're going to have to read the book actually, and all this. Just the satisfaction on their face when they accomplish something. They know when a class is easy.
Yeah.
And they know when they skate by, and that A doesn't mean as much to them.
Right.
But when they leave and they know they've been accountable, and they know that that they have the right to be there, but they have the responsibility to use it properly. When they walk away, there's pride because they actually earned it.
Yeah.
Right. And that's rewarding to you too, I'm sure, when you see that.
Especially when you see kids that maybe were struggling a little bit and then they pulled it off.
Oh yeah,
They're like a glow about them, and
there is.
hey,
And it's
I got an A.
Like I had one student a couple years back, and he was what they would classify as like a struggling student, right? He had a learning disability. English was not his first language. He'd been here probably 10 or 15 years, so he knew the language, but it still wasn't a first language.
Right.
And by standards and by data, I never should have passed that AP exam. And I mean, it's a hard exam. And,
Sure.
And he worked,
Yeah.
hard. And he would come in and I wouldn't just say, he would come in and I, give him a test or whatever. And I'm like, listen, you got a D on this test. Let's rework on it. And I felt like he appreciated the fact that I wasn't just giving him an A because I felt bad for him. Like, oh, well, here's, I would give him an opportunity to fix the grade. So he didn't keep the D. But I didn't just come in and be like, oh, here's an A.
So he was taking
Yeah.
pride in his
Oh
his
yeah,
own
and he
abilities.
passed. He passed
that's
the exam,
amazing.
and oh yeah, and which even told me there, like, if he can do it, all of you can do it.
Yeah.
Because he had every reason not to pass that exam,
And he
Yeah.
did it.
and he
It's
did
all
it.
a matter of effort. So I think this is, as we talk about focus and effort with kids, this is something that's always kind of interesting to me. But there's a lot of distractions in the world today that we didn't have in our generation. And really, I'm a generation older than you. And I think even in your generation, it wasn't around as much. But social media, everything's screaming for your attention every 5 seconds. Have you found that students have a harder time focusing than? I mean, do you see that degrading over time, or is it because this is what I envision. I'm not a teacher, but I envision just from raising my own kids, if you're not careful, they're trying to check their phone or be in that world all the time. And anything else outside of that, they're kind of half present if you're not careful.
Yes, I would say the introduction of cell phones in particular, like smartphones, all of those, iPads, it's come with good and bads.
Sure.
And one of the things I've learned is that kids can't be bored anymore.
Right.
They're not used to just having to sit.
Yes.
And
This is a theme because
This
this
is
is
a theme.
exactly what Angel said
Yeah.
about elementary students.
But neither are adults. But I want to
Yeah.
let you go. I'm gonna let you finish here.
yeah, I just like they don't know. They think that everything should be entertaining,
Yes.
and so I get a lot of, well, I don't really, the Gilded Age, just boring. I don't want to read about it. And I'm like, we're not always going to be entertained. Life isn't entertaining, or they don't know how to sit very long. And that's one of the problems with these standardized tests is that you're taking kids that are very, they want instant gratification,
Yes,
and you're making them
that's
sit
what I
down for
meant.
4 hours or
Yes.
3 hours to
It's got to be very
test.
structured. It doesn't make sense. Yeah.
And it's and so that's one of the things is like at least in my own personal life with my 3 kids, I try to give them opportunities of boredom, which sounds really horrible, but I like and I'm not perfect. Obviously,
Yeah.
we had a 14-hour car ride on Sunday, and I definitely let them watch a movie. But
Of course.
but there were times where I'm like, hey, we're going to turn the TV off. Let's just look out the window.
Yeah.
And it inspires them to be creative and imaginative. Like,
Draw a picture.
oh yeah.
or,
And there was
play a
definitely,
game.
there was a little fighting in the beginning,
course.
a
Yeah.
little crossing the lines that,
Yeah.
don't cross this line.
I'm not touching you. I'm not touching you.
So-and-so's looking at me funny. But my husband's like, why are you doing this? You're torturing yourself. And I'm like, because it's better for them.
It really is.
They need to learn how to be bored, and they need to learn how to sit still.
Implementing that kind of thing in the classroom, though, has to be tricky. And again, I feel spoiled when you talk about parenting because I was right on that line. I dodged a bullet because I remember being in the car with my two playing the name game and playing the sign game because devices just weren't so commonplace yet. But in the classroom, I suppose you can't have your phone out in front of you. So that's kind of a savior, but it sounds like their behavior, I just picture a bunch of fidgety high schoolers that can't hardly stand to sit still because of this.
Somewhat. And I don't know. They definitely, I feel like the biggest thing with them is I don't feel like they're too fidgety. They'll sit down and they'll listen. But one of the things they don't like to do, and I don't know if this is a generational thing or not, but they're not very good at solving problems. They want the answer now.
Yes.
That's the instant gratification.
It's a Google search. Everyth's a Google search away.
Oh, yeah.
It's,
And my students in particular, they get so frustrated because they'll say, oh, where's the Declaration of Independence in the book? And I'm like, oh, there's an index.
They don't know what an index is.
And they're like, what? And I'm like, look it up, and so one of the funny things in class, I had a student last year, and he, one of the kids was like, hey, where's, whatever, Voltaire in the book? And the kid's like, it's right here. It's in the index. And so all year we told him he was the problem solver. I'm like, look at you. You're a problem solver.
Nice.
And so that's like a running joke. So every time we did something, he's like, Miss, I'm the problem solver.
Nice. Well, that brings me into my next question, which was about technology in the classroom. And I hate to admit, when you talk about looking at an index in a paper book, because of my life, I have migrated myself, my kids, Anjee, all of us to digital. I write everything digital at work every day. And for me, it's the same information. I read digital books, but I can punch up a search in that book or in that document, and it just goes to the page. I'm getting the same information. Do you think there's value in having to manually go find that information versus a search? And are you guys using technology in the classrooms?
Yes. So the school that I work at, we're 1-to-1. So every single student in our high school has a Chromebook.
Oh, cool.
Very nice.
Yeah. And so, it gives them an opportunity. So we incorporate Google Classroom. So my students have Google Classroom. And I'm with you. So even putting in, speaking as a high school teacher, putting in the Control F or whatever it is for search, that's still problem solving.
Yes.
If a kid did that, I would still be impressed.
So I loved hearing that.
Yeah.
Because some of the mundane processes to me, I don't get.
Yeah.
I don't use paper because I can't keep up with it. But if I have my iPad, I have all of my documentation,
Yeah. And I do, and so I enjoy the Chromebook. And, my master's degree was completely online.
Yes.
I did it all online.
Yep.
And I don't have an issue at all with technology. In fact, I think it's great. And I even like that the kids, I tell them all the time, I don't care where you find the information as long as it's right.
Yeah.
And
so make sure you do your research to make sure it's credible.
Yeah. And so
teaching them how to fact check and all that good stuff.
And my master's degree, there wasn't a ton of classes where they're like, you have to use this textbook or you have to use this book.
Right.
It was more like, hey, here's the problem, solve it. Tell me about this person or tell me about this idea. And so I'm kind of the same with my students. The county has required textbooks and all of this, and we use it more as supplemental resources, like if we're doing things in the classroom. But I don't care necessarily where the kids get it. And that's where the technology is good because I expose them. One of the big things I do with my AP, there's a ton of amazing AP teachers out there, and they create and I'm assuming they don't have children, but they create just hours and hours and hours of online content on YouTube, and they create these web pages and all that. And I tell the kids, I don't care if you're listening to this guy tell you, if you're reading it out of a book, if you're a reader, if you're listening to this podcast, I don't care where it's coming from. I just want it to be right. And so I try not to necessarily pigeonhole them to whatever the textbook is.
Yeah. That's refreshing to hear. I think that learning in general can be so much more fun now because, and I hate to admit this, but I watch probably 10 YouTube videos every night on random stuff
Yeah.
that I'm just learning for various reasons. And I think now that you mention it, as a high school kid, that would have been an amazing resource if you don't get down the YouTube hole and you're watching something silly. But
I'm sure that happens.
yeah, I'm sure it does too. But that being able to sort of learn it however it works best for you is great.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, and I'll have students come in that will, say we're talking about whatever the founding fathers, and I'm telling them the difference between Hamilton and Jefferson and all of this, and I'll have a kid say, "What about so and so?" And I'm like, I don't know who that is. And they're like, oh, I was on Wikipedia and I was learning about Thomas Jefferson. And then I clicked this and then I clicked this and then I clicked this. And at first, I'm like, he's not important. Like if I don't know who he is, he's not on the test.
Yeah.
But the other side of me is like, how amazing with technology that this kid, was able to just click and learn something. And he may not be tested on it, but just to know that he cared enough to keep clicking.
Yeah.
And like, oh, Thomas Jefferson was, an anti-federalist. What are anti-federalists? And he clicks it and he's like, oh, well, who's James Madison? Oh, and then they just keep clicking on. And that, I love technology for that.
I do too.
I think that's awesome.
I think also the books, when we were in high school, the book might have been 5 years old. And this probably really relates to history too, because we learn more about history. So there's some discovery that happened. And then it kind of changes it kind of rewrites history a little bit in some cases if they find out that something happened differently because there's a new discovery out there. There's a city that was unearthed or whatever it is. And in our day, you just had the stale information. You know what I mean? And when it's a digital book, it can be updated, like that.
And I think for the economics behind that, it's just smart.
Oh, yeah. So there's no reprinting of books and
ebooks instead of the printed book.
Yeah.
I mean, I understand that, some kids still, people are still readers. They like that. But the value, it just doesn't make sense to me anymore.
From
as far as
just economical value alone.
Yeah, economical value.
Yeah.
Like just print it out a little bit. You know what I mean? Like print out the pages you want if you need it.
Right. But I love hearing
it's easy
that.
to go on and just update something.
Yeah.
Agree.
I do love hearing that the technology is playing a real role like that, though.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And you couldn't, in today's world, you just can't anymore.
Yeah.
I can't just put a textbook in front of them and say, read it. And in some way, and like I said, in some ways that's really good. And I do still hold my students accountable to reading because, that's what they're going to have to do in life. Not everything's on, I'm sure everything is on a YouTube video, but
you got to read the document that you signed for work. You got to, read about your tax. I mean, even just stuff like that. You got to be able to, problem solve a document sometimes. What does that mean?
Yeah.
What does that mean?
There's something about the reading process too. I think your brain is learning differently when you're reading.
We did some research on that. Remember, there is something with
that's right. We
activates some part of the brain that lights up when you actually
are reading.
Oh,
print.
yeah. Well,
but it could be digital print.
Yeah,
too,
any type of.
Well, and I
reading.
try to get my students. So, like I said, I don't necessarily pigeonhole them to a textbook by state laws and county standards and all this. I have to have a textbook. And parents like to hear there's a textbook. You never want to tell a parent there's not a textbook. But,
of course.
Where's my money going?
Yeah. But I try to get them to read more so in my AP US history class, I'm making them read books. Like the autobiography of Ben Franklin, I have them read in the first 9 weeks.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah. And then we break it down and I make them think historically about it. So they're being exposed to something that's maybe a little bit more entertaining than a textbook.
Yeah.
But you can learn so much from it. So then I'm like, okay, well, Ben Franklin wrote this. Like, how does that tie to the Great Awakening? How does that tie to the Revolution? How does that, can we see where the Revolution was coming? By the way that Ben Franklin writes, we read Uncle Tom's Cabin, which, Abraham Lincoln said was the book that caused the Great War. Why?
Yeah.
What did Harriet Beecher Stowe say? Why is it so important? We read The Jungle in the third 9 weeks and talk about like the progressive era and the need for government maybe to step in and say, hey, what's happening in that meatpacking industry, that you're giving these people. And I have them read 1984 by George Orwell.
Oh, the best one.
Yeah. Well, that was the year I was born, so I have a tight fondness for that.
Oh, of
but
course.
I would love to say I know what that is, but I really don't.
we'll just say the Cold War, but yeah.
Okay.
And so I have them read that, and then we talk about George Orwell and one of the neat, which I don't want to bore you, but one of the neat things about George Orwell is he was a socialist who criticized socialism, and was like, and so he wrote this whole book and saying this is the world, that we're creating and be fearful of it. And,
isn't that great though? Because we talk a lot about how learning helps you to evolve. And someone like that, who's a socialist who was criticizing socialism, that's because he was evolving through what he was learning, seeing, and if you don't, you're stagnant.
Yeah.
So it's important, whatever type of, learning that you do, just do something so that you're moving forward. Well, Miss Kristen, I think we're running over an hour now.
That's okay.
Sorry.
Yeah, it's great. No, it's awesome.
So, a big part of our podcast is really being more involved in the community. And we know teachers are already very involved in the community. Is there anything you do outside of school, any organizations that you work with, charities that you work with that is kind of you being more involved in the community outside of school? Because that's already very involved.
Yes. I'm not necessarily tied to a lot of organizations outside the community besides baseball. I think I told you guys earlier, but
we talked to Angel about that though. That's your life. You are a teacher mom.
Yes.
Right? Is that how they say it? Teacher mom?
Teacher mom. Yep. That's what
that's what your life is consumed of.
Absolutely. Well, and I'm a big advocate for sports. I was never a sports person. I had a sister. I didn't have any brothers. My dad loved sports, but I didn't care. And, yep. And I've learned that sports is a good way to keep kids in school.
Yes.
And it's a motivational technique for kids that, like we talked about earlier, that aren't going to college. Getting straight A's is not important to them, but, getting at least a C or a B to stay on the football team is.
It's a motivator.
It's a motivator.
Yeah.
And so we do a lot with that. My husband's a coach. We do Babe Ruth, and he's involved in that. But besides sports, most of the things we do is inside the school. I do because I like to know, not that I'm discrediting any organizations.
No, of course not.
But I like to know where my efforts are going. And so we do, there's one of the teachers down the hallway is just amazing at this. And so we like to help out kids at our school in our community that need it. So 2 years ago, and I would never advise this for most people, but I actually allowed one of the homeless students to live in my house for 9 months.
Wow.
That's wonderful.
Yeah. His mom called him up and said, "I'm going to Tampa. Sorry." And just literally just left him.
Oh, goodness.
Yeah. He was 17 years old and at the end of the hallway crying because he didn't know what to do. And so I was like I didn't even give my husband time to think about it, and he still reminds me to this day about that. But
that was your choice.
Yeah.
Wow, that is definitely giving back. Wow.
So I just went down to the principal and I'm like, he has nowhere to go. And,
is
for
this
all,
okay?
Yeah, for all legal reasons, I'm letting you know right now, we took him in for 9 months. He stayed with us. And I just drove him to school every day.
Coffee's done.
Sorry.
No, you're fine. We kept him in school and, he ended up getting a job. He worked at Lowe's and now he's actually in firefighting school. So.
This is awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Love
what a
it.
success story.
Yeah.
Talk about giving back. Okay. This lady takes the kids home, people. No.
Well, no, that's not an offer.
There's a one-off. Yeah.
Yeah. But that is really, that's going above and beyond.
And you see a lot of that. And I know Angel, who, I'm not quite sure what she's exposed to at the elementary level, but at the high school level, you can definitely tell, the kids who aren't getting what they're needed at home. And if they're not being fed, and they're not being clothed, or clothed, they're not really they don't care.
Of course they don't. Everything else is trivial.
That's
probably.
what their focus is on. They're hungry, and we work with an organization, Bags of Hope, that helps kids that are in need in this area. And there's a lot of schools that have programs where they have like a little like food pantries or, these little stores that kids can go in and get stuff discreetly when they're, parents can't provide for it or don't, because some don't, but most just can't.
And what we've learned from that organization and working with Rhonda and the people there is that kids don't, without those basics, they're not going to focus on, they can't develop they can't develop hope. That's why they call it Bags of Hope, but they can't develop any of the motivation to learn or to dream or to do anything that's going to make them successful. They're just thinking about food and how they're going to eat.
Or where they're going to sleep sometimes.
Right.
Exactly.
Yeah. And it is. And so like I said, one of the teachers down the hall, she's the mastermind behind all of it. I mean, I just contribute minimal compared to what she does. But, we have an entire closet at our high school where, and kids kind of know now to go to her,
Word gets around.
And, she would even bring, this child before he lived with me and I was unaware, just bring them all the time. Like, hey, here's groceries, here's bread.
A food pantry thing.
Yeah. And so there's a lot of that going on at the school. And that's where I kind of tend to focus a lot of my efforts.
Yeah. That's a big effort though.
Yeah.
And donating like, we did like fundraisers. So kids that couldn't afford prom tickets could get free prom tickets.
Well, we would love to know when you are in need of stuff like that so that we can blast it.
Indeed.
Absolutely.
And I know that around prom time too, there's a lot of organizations that do like donate your old prom dresses so that they have like an actual store to come in and shop at. Cause everybody wants to go do that. And tickets for that are expensive usually.
Oh, yeah.
So yeah. So let us know anytime you guys are in need and we can, reach out to our little community, blast it out and I run around, pick up donations from people, take them places. That's kind of,
awesome.
we're trying to be the go-between.
Yeah.
That's what Fine and Anjee is, right?
Indeed.
Trying to be the go-between to help as many organizations as we can.
Well, and it does. It made, that child's life changed when he had an opportunity to do something else. And not that his life was easy afterwards. It definitely wasn't, the family was still there and in contact and, he was oftentimes pulled in different directions. Yeah. But, ultimately, I think it gave him an opportunity to make a choice that he didn't have a choice before.
Right. He get that word, though, that we talk about, hope. It gave him some hope for the future that things couldn't be different. Things don't have to remain. There doesn't need to be a cycle. Yeah. Basically, you try to break that cycle and give kids hope that, things can be different in the future.
Indeed.
Yeah.
Well, Kristen, thank you for sitting and talking with us. It's been fun and educational. And
I learned some history stuff. Now I got to go look it up.
I know when you're talking about the biography of Benjamin Franklin, I'm thinking that actually sounds like something that might be fun to just read for the heck of it.
It is. Yeah. It's very interesting. In the end, he kind of stopped writing, so it's more of like the beginning of his life.
Yeah, he was a big writer, right?
He was.
Yeah.
Early on.
See, I knew that.
He did.
But I'll watch a documentary.
There you go.
All right, guys. Thank you so much. And we will be right back with the information station.
Hi, this is Bill Files, the upcoming audiobook narrator of Daniel Fox's awesome thriller, In the Dark. And you're listening to It's All Fine and Anjee.
Welcome back to the It's All Fine and Anjee podcast. And now it's time for the information station. But before we jump into that, as always, I want to give one more thank you to Kristen Rogers for coming out and meeting with us. Very interesting interview. And I learned a lot, as I always seem to do from these things.
I even learned a little history.
Yes, and history seems fun to me now. So either I've gone super nerdy, or it's the way she does it, or it's just getting older.
Yeah.
Or more mature. Let's say more mature.
I mean, there are a couple things I want to look up now that, she mentioned a couple things. And I'm like, okay, I'm going to look those things up now.
Well, speaking of looking
I don't know if I'm going to get full-fledged into the history.
Deep dive, yeah. Well, so I always ask questions around the technology, and I wanted to give a little bit of information around that during the information station. Mm-hmm. And that is that advances in technology have actually helped to bring more understanding about the development of the human brain during the teenage years. And I kind of knew some of this already.
Yeah.
But the changes that happen during these years are some of the most dramatic, with the exception of between like ages 2 and 3, those formative development
terrible
years. Terrible
twos.
Yes.
Uh-huh.
But think about that. For teenagers, that's when and I think sometimes teenagers get a bad rap because there's some crazy stuff going on in their bodies.
Yeah.
And as a parent of teenagers, sometimes you're like, why are they being so whatever the fill in the blank?
Yeah. There's a science behind it.
There is
though.
a science. Mm-hmm. And more specifically, these changes occur in the prefrontal cortex. That's the area of the brain that's responsible for planning and problem solving and determining risk and social interaction, and most importantly, decision making.
That makes a lot of sense, doesn't it?
It really does. And it can actually make it difficult for them to read.
Huh, I wonder why that is. Did it bring more out about that?
I don't remember. I was so disappointed to read that part because
That you stopped reading.
And there wasn't really that much more of it in the page I was reading.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I don't know if it's just because of the, reading kind of is a little bit of mini problem solving.
Yeah, that's true.
There's sort of an analysis going on in your brain when you read, and I'm assuming it has something to do with that. So it's also interesting that at a time when you're almost forced to read more than you ever are again in your life, unless you're going on to become like a paralegal or a lawyer or doctor or something like that, it's the time when it's most difficult for you to actually read and focus on it.
I know, it's crazy.
Sometimes I think our whole schooling setup happens too early because, when you get older, you really are interested in all this stuff.
Yes, sir.
So,
I do.
I know.
I know this. Well, I think it's important for teachers to, keep up to date on any advances in technology made on how the brain works,
yeah, I agree.
Especially in whatever age group they're teaching. And I'm sure that most teachers study this kind of information and probably come up with ideas of how they can combat the struggles that their students may be having during those developmental years.
Yeah.
I'm sure I'm sure maybe psychology and different studies like that are a part of getting an education background, what am I trying to say?
Getting a background in education. But I think, as I'm talking about the advances in technology that have helped us to understand that, to your point, I think if now that teachers are reading about these same advances and learning more about how the brain works, then I would say a good teacher is, like you're saying, keeping that in mind when they do their syllabus.
Yeah. Implementing things that will help.
Yeah.
Help them with these struggles that they're actually physiologically going through. They don't even know it.
Yeah.
They don't even know that it's not really their fault.
Right.
But we blame it on them.
No, I know we tend to, don't we? But see, that brings me back
teenagers.
to some of the stuff Kristen was saying, though. I think it's those kinds of things where a good teacher is sort of tailoring their lesson plan around making it more interesting, making it more interactive. She was talking about people that would come back for, the next year or whatever. And I think that's a sign that she's doing something right. And that's refreshing and it's encouraging because
they weren't trying to claw their way out of the class. They were actually excited to be back in the class.
Well, it's encouraging to me that there's advancements happening. It's nice to hear that it's not exactly the same as it was way back when I was in school.
Yeah.
In another 20 or 30 years, it's going to be that much further along. One would hope.
Yeah, yeah. Well, hello.
Did everyone hear that?
Of course they did.
It's my reminders I don't have turned off like I'm supposed to.
Well, I'm going to go more towards the health side of things every time, most of the time when I try to do research.
Yep.
And so we have two teenagers in the house.
That's right.
One especially doesn't sleep well.
Yes, I saw him on the video camera at 4:30 this morning.
Oh my gosh. So sleep plays such a huge role during these years of when their brains developing, when their body is changing. And what I found was
Tommy, your body's changing. Yeah. Sorry, I couldn't resist.
What I found was that one study showed that only 8% of teens get the recommended 9 hours of sleep per night. That's how much they're recommended.
9 hours?
9 hours.
They get half of that.
Yeah. They get under 6 hours is I think what it brought out. But the amount of sleep, it's so important for them to function optimally.
Yeah.
You know, it's just...
Well, for all of us, but especially for them.
Especially for them. And this was really sad to me. 33% of teenagers between the ages of 12 and 19 had chronic sleep deprivation.
Oh.
Gets worse. 59% had severe sleep deprivation. That is not good.
You know what's probably doing that?
Electronics.
Devices, yep. Son of a gun.
You know, and the thing is, you know, especially for them, when, you know, that they're growing and there's certain things that happen at night when you're sleeping. Okay. Our body does so much while it's resting. One of the huge things that happens is that it releases hormones that help to repair your cells and also to control how your energy is used in your body.
Yeah.
This is why people that don't sleep well, their energy, it kind of gets mixed up. Let's say that. And that's why a lot of people can gain weight if they're not getting the proper amount of sleep.
Right. Your body's not working the way it's supposed to.
That's right. So it's well known that a lack of sleep can cause other issues as well. Some of the more serious diseases that it's actually linked to are obesity, diabetes, and heart disease, among a slew of other things.
Right. Wow.
So to see that our youth are going through this deprivation of sleep already at such a young age, to me, 15 years down the road, that's when those chronic diseases start setting in. And it's just so scary to me.
That's what I was going to say, you know, talking about like, you know, the growth hormone that's released when teenagers are sleeping. It makes me think we don't really even know if it's primarily probably because of electronic devices, smartphones. They're probably more deprived now than ever. We don't have a generation of adults that have come from this. So we don't know. You were probably right.
Yeah.
There's probably all kinds of problems adults are going to have in the next generation that we haven't even seen yet.
Yeah. And I think one of the problems I've always had with school is how early high school and middle school kids start. I think middle school kids start a little later now, but I don't think kids should start till like 10 o'clock.
Oh, I know, but they can't do it that way because they share the buses between all the schools. So, you know, that's why one of them is really early, one of them's late. It's the same buses. It's all the same drivers, at least for most cities.
Yeah, it's crazy.
So
it's crazy.
It's
gotta
depressing.
Be some kind of fix.
I know, and I hate for us to end that on such a depressing note, but it does make you want to think if you've got teenagers. I mean, look, I don't want to be a hypocrite because I kind of just let mine do whatever now that he's graduated, but
I know, but I say something to him every time.
But he does seem kind of
he
like
avoids me
he seems kind of worn out all the time.
He does,
and it's not from they're not working 40 hours a week.
No.
So
he's working late hours, and instead of having his free time during the day, he's staying up all night and sleeping all day. I mean, there's just something to
getting in the right amount of sleep.
Rest at the right amount. We have day and night for a reason.
Yeah.
People.
I mean, we're all guilty of it. I mean, we all stay up a little later than we should, but
of course.
Maybe this is like the crotchety old man that I'm becoming, as my kids will joke and say I'm going to be. But when you start getting older, and I'm closing in on 50 pretty quickly here, you genuinely, I don't feel that much different, but you genuinely get tired at about 10 o'clock. At about 10 o'clock, you're starting to feel like it should be bedtime soon.
Yeah, that's the melatonin, that is being released in your body to let you know it's nighttime, it's time to rest. Your body needs to repair.
Indeed.
And I didn't want to be all negative, but I think sometimes we have to shock people with like these statistics and numbers so that they can really go, oh, maybe I really need to start looking at that and making a change.
Yeah.
Because we don't see we might not see negative effects from it quickly.
Right.
But I guarantee you 10 to 15 years down the road,
we will.
We are going to, your children are going to suffer. So, and we're going to suffer if we don't take care of ourselves. So,
well, on that note, it's 9:36, so I got to go to bed soon.
Bedtime in 24 minutes, buddy.
All right. Goodness. Well, also don't forget that our contest is still going on, guys. Please help us support Alex's Lemonade Stand and the Golden Warrior Festival for the upcoming month of September. The contest rules again, go to alexslemonade.org Is it Alex's Lemonade
Yes.
or Alex's Lemonade Stand?
Just alexslemonade.org.
Yeah, go to alexslemonade.org. Hit the donate button, donate whatever you can, $1, $5, $10,000, whatever fits in your budget. Take a screenshot of your receipt, which they have a button for your receipt right there. Send it to feedback@fineandanjee.com, and you are entered to win a prize. We've got a lot of good prizes, and we don't have that many entries, to be completely candid with you. So it's looking like pretty much everyone that enters so far is going to be getting a prize.
Yeah,
so
that is
take
what it
advantage of
looks
those
like.
odds,
Yeah.
and please enter.
And also on the website, I'm going to post a picture of the sign that my friend Mindy helped to design for helping to turn a Popka gold. That's for the Golden Warrior Festival. All proceeds for that. It's a yard sign. Because the ribbon thing, I know told everybody we're going to do a ribbon on the door. It just wasn't working out.
I got you.
I'm sorry. I'm not that crafty. I don't know what it is. I couldn't find big enough ribbon. So we came up with a different idea. So we're going to do the yard signs.
It's more visible anyway.
They're very nicely designed. Mindy did a really great job. And we're going to have an option where we can actually add a piece of gold ribbon to it so that you can hang it on your door if you want it on your door instead with like a little suction cup.
Oh, nice.
So we would like a minimum donation of $15 for those to cover the cost of them, and then the rest going to Alex's Lemonade Stand. And message us if you're interested. We will be hitting the streets to be selling those soon.
That's right. That's awesome. And then again, so you're going to have a picture on the website of it so people can go see it.
Yeah.
So that's fineandanjee.com to go check that out. And we want to hear from you. Call us at 407-490-3899 or email us at feedback@fineandanjee. That's the same email address as the contest. If you just want to email us or call us and tell us your thoughts, your issues, what you're going through, what you think about the show, you have any questions or suggestions, or maybe you just want to say hi. And that wraps.
Yeah, don't forget our hashtags. If you happen to hang a gold ribbon up or, are supporting Childhood Cancer Awareness Month, I got it out. Make sure to include that hashtag #TurnAPopkaGold. Get it trending.
Yes.
And then also it's our month of teachers. So tell us a story about your favorite teacher, post something about them, do a hashtag month of teachers, and always our hashtag help more people when
That's
you're
right.
out in the community helping.
Indeed. And don't forget, at the end of the day,
It's all fine and dandy.
Yeah.
I'm trying to make you nuts.
I don't know how I'm going to fix that.
You want me to go back and do it
I don't
again?
know. We'll see. But it's funny because you go, I wish I could.
Stop.
You'll go, our body does so much well. It's, and on our website,
That's right, my name.